I wouldn't describe our guests today as being irregular, but they're
irreverent.
We should probably save this for air.
Yeah. Well, I think we should officially kick it off. Welcome, audience. Welcome, panelists. Welcome to the Intro Zone. In case you didn't know it, as you walk through that door, you are now in the Intro Zone. And just to let you know who we are, I'm Mark Cashman, and as always, here with my co-host, Chris, the guy who's still looking at his phone. We've got the session already started, McNulty.
Thank you very much, Mark. So, great to have so many folks here. It is wonderful to be able to fit far more people than we can usually fit into the Microsoft recording studios, although we've tried.
We did try.
We've tried. This is our second live recording, and so what's great about that is being able to get immediate reaction from our listeners, because usually I say things and I have no idea how people are going to react online. I haven't heard that there's more car accidents among IntroZone listeners, so we're probably in good shape.
We're okay there. We did hear a little bit of feedback on the roadmap sessions to use less braking or sirens, so we've adjusted.
We're at SharePoint Conference 2019, and so we're going to introduce our panel. We're going to get their perspective on what they've heard today, how they're seeing digital transformation working across their clients and their enterprises, and then give you a chance to ask us questions with a chance to compete for valuable swag and prizes.
So we first want to introduce our panelists, so you know who is sitting here. You probably already know them. They probably go without introduction. But for the benefit of just being here and being brave enough to be on our second live show, before we introduce them, big round of applause for our panelists. Woo! So let's find out who they are. Take a moment, share who you are, what you do, and why you're here at the SharePoint conference. Kerry, we'll start with you. Kerry Lambert from National Instruments.
Yes, so Kerry Lambert, National Instruments in Austin, Texas. So I'm on the collaboration team supporting Office 365 and everything therein, including SharePoint. I'm here because where else should I be other than SharePoint conference?
So let's continue down the panel.
How's it going, guys? I'm Dave Feldman from Takeda. I am responsible for our SharePoint, OneDrive, Yammer, all-up collab platforms and stack. I'm also kind of sitting in the right place, wearing both a customer hat and a MVP hat, because I'm also an Office Apps and Services MVP, and getting to do a couple fantastic sessions at my favorite conference of the year.
Awesome. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Dave. Sue?
I'm Sue Hanley. I am an independent consultant and a business analyst and information architect. And I'm at this conference because I did a workshop yesterday on information architecture.
A very well-attended workshop.
Yeah, it was fun. And 2 sessions on Thursday.
Excellent.
And where else would I be?
Certainly today was a big day for the SharePoint team, announcing a lot of news and announcements across all the workloads. But if you think about Jeff Teper's keynote, what were some of the things that you liked the most or were most appreciative of, like that's going to really help us do X or Y? Kerry, we'll start with you. What was your first best thing you heard in the Jeff Teper's keynote?
Well, so I have a few things. I mean, home sites, obviously, but I think I like the real one-click access. I mean, we have a communication site already, but being able to elevate that for our users, I think is going to be key. On a personal note, I love that I can create a task for myself in Word, just a minor thing, and I really love the vertical column. I just think that's a really cool design feature. Looking forward to that.
Very nice. Excellent. Dave, did you have anything? I know that you also, your company was represented in the keynote.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So hearing about Takeda was probably the highlight of the keynote, right?
No, not at all. I knew that story, believe it or not. So for me, I had a couple of different things that I thought were awesome. Navjot's security and compliance area was one of my favorites. Being able to act on protected documents inside SharePoint. I don't know if the full ramifications of that have hit everyone yet, but to be able to have encrypted documents but still be able to co-author against them is groundbreaking, right? If you think about just the ability to control our information, especially from a pharma perspective where you've got sensitive data, that's huge.
And to be real clear on what Dave's talking about, you know, when you have a file that's rights protected, the limitations in the past have been we weren't able to sync it and you couldn't see it in an Office application through the browser. So they showed accessing an RMS file through the browser, and then the sort of echo off of that as a previous announcement is that file would also sync with the OneDrive sync client.
Yeah, the second one I would throw on there as well is on the Yammer side of the house. The Q&A functionality inside there. Thinking of Yammer as really being a differentiated knowledge management tool rather than just, two different chat tools between teams in Yammer. Which do I use when? Like, I love seeing the investment in Yammer as a platform that's actually designed to support that. The bot integration on top of that, being able to answer that with Flow connecting in, I think has just tremendous potential. I'm really excited to go play with that.
And Sue, Kerry and Dave have given us their take on what they liked in the keynote. What was yours?
Well, it's really hard to follow them because, of course, it's the very same thing. So I really believe that the modern intranet desperately needs to be all about me, not just me personally, but each one of us.
Yep.
And what I love is, and I also love the vertical column because it's a great way to not get corporate communications all mad because we're going to take real estate from corporate news, but to allow that home site to have personalized content that's directed to me that will make me want to go there more often, which really benefits everybody.
You think that's something that corporate communications would have pushed against or will push against?
I don't think I don't know that they would push against. I think what CorpCom would typically push against was having the me content on top, but having the me content on the right-hand side, but with the prominent area, the most prominent area on the page is that 2/3 margin on the left, and to have the corporate content there and my personalized content on the right really, to me, is the right balance of all about me and all about us on the homepage.
So 2 takeaways I have are vertical columns almost got 2 votes. So vertical columns win. And if we need to get a new name for home sites, they should be called Sue sites.
Well,
if you agree, we can work on naming, branding. So our first question, sort of post-keynote address, is to Sue. You have been recently called the Marie Kondo of content. First, how do you feel about that? And then if you can explain how you embody that persona, what's the most critical thing that you can influence to bring SharePoint joy to your customers?
So I do love organizing things, and I think, so I'll own that. I think I may have said I want to be the Marie Kondo of your intranet, because I really would love to see people use all the capabilities they can to not just clean up their content, but get rid of the crap. Like, get rid of the old stuff, the .v1, .v2, .final, .really final, .this time I mean it versions of their documents, and to have in place a governance plan to keep all that content up to date. So if that's what it means to be the Marie Kondo of content, I'm all for that. Or maybe she can be the Sue Hanley of your t-shirt drawer.
I was about to say, I think it can go both ways. If she ever starts cleaning up metadata, she's got to think about a co-branding at least.
Right,
at least.
Exactly.
So,
Sorry.
Dave, sometimes you've been referred to as being a transition master, which is not a reference to your wizardry and artistry and PowerPoint, but you arrived at what was then Shire in the middle of digesting a number of mergers and organizational technical transitions, and have since embarked on another one with Takeda. Can you talk a little bit about how do you manage change across multiple axes at the same time, both technical as well as organizational?
Sure. So in general, all of us really kind of resist change. At a time when the organization is changing a lot and you have 2 companies coming together, there's a natural amount of change that builds up and makes it really easy to be able to bolt on and do some real innovation. At the time of Baxalta and Shire coming together, they had 2 intranets. One of them was a SharePoint 2010 intranet. One of them was a SharePoint Online, heavily customized. Every site looked completely and totally different. It was a mess. So to be able to have that opportunity to bring it together, identify what the brand of the new company is going to look like, and everyone is searching for information, right? They don't know who they work for yet. So just recently we got acquired by Takeda, and on day 1, there were less than 200 leaders in the entire company of 60,000 people named. So very few people knew, who was in what role. Everyone's craving information, so it's a natural time to be able to create an intranet and take advantage of that situation.
When you have people coming in from multiple companies, we always think of the internet as something you can then promote to bring them all together, but there must be a lot of other things that need to come together, like what was their Active Directory like, and how do they all fit in? But the motion of getting to know other people, we have a big part of what we hope to make the internet a very personalized experience, easy to learn things about other people. What does that mean when somebody is literally new, like Active Directory just barely knows about them when they come into the internet?
So it's a really interesting lesson learned, actually. So when we did this the first time with Shire and Baxalta, we wanted to make it as simple as possible for everyone to get in on day one. So we actually used B2B accounts, and we had onboarded 20,000 people as guests into our tenant. It was the biggest mistake I would say I've ever made in my sort of technology life, because I now had 20,000 second-class citizens who couldn't manage a team site, who were not real members of the company. So this time around, we switched that, and we actually onboarded 30,000 people into Active Directory as real users to be able to do that. That let us open up Yammer, which was fantastic. We did things like Together Takeda as a group for promoting everything integration related. Coffee with a Colleague as a hashtag inside Yammer, where people would post photos of themselves, just try to start to build camaraderie and build a community on day one. And I think it was super effective.
Thank you. So, Kerry, I think in another form of a transition in 2015, your company moved off of Notes.
Praise the Lord.
But in 2015, you all moved off of Notes, and then 2 years later began to adopt Office 365 groups, Microsoft Teams, and certainly we see that as a big shift. When you think about starting to use SharePoint type of materials beyond Notes, and you're using team sites, communications hub sites, how did that help redefine the work that you do and, of course, your company, everything across National Instruments?
Yeah, so last year we kicked off this cross-functional, top-down directed Modern Workplace initiative, and so we built this great community of 100 or more people that are all talking about how we can collaborate and communicate better. And so part of that is we started collecting success stories on the way people are using Office 365. We launched, in partnership with Corporate Communications and HR, an amazing communication site. We call it the Employee Hub. That's kind of like the go-to resource for all things NI or National Instruments. We've done a lot of live events. We did our company meeting in live events. We've done sales and marketing conference, tons of town halls. We're seeing a lot of success, and we're seeing a lot of the success come in, and we're promoting that through our amazing adoption center, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But we're just seeing a lot of great usage. Our Teams usage is now 80%, but I think a lot of it is just pulling in some of that success and just sharing with others, and kind of that peer kind of champions network that's really kind of built up the usage.
Would you say that when you first cut over from Notes in 2015 to that first step, was that the most resistance, or would you say it's always resistant to anything that you want to adopt as change? Because I get a sense from hearing what you're saying and knowing a little bit about you, researching for having you on the panel, that you're an early adopter, but I'm not sure on how that translates to the whole company.
Well, I think a lot of that just happens organically, but I think for us it was when Planner was introduced, everyone really loved it. So we're like, okay, we'll give you guys Planner, we'll turn on self-service for Office 365 groups, go have fun. 8,000 groups later, it's awesome for sure, but I think what kind of our approach, and I've got my team here, Adrian and Pei Fong, they're amazing, couldn't do this with them. Right here. Woo! But we tend to, as soon as it's available, we're going to turn it on. And so we're going to make that available to our users. And then what we're going to do is we're going to follow that up with training and communication. We're not just going to let people go wild, even though they're going to do that on their own anyway. We're at least going to try to help them as much as we can.
How big is National Instruments and sort of the breadth of where you are located?
Yeah, so we're in Austin, Texas. We're a global company. We've got major sites in Debrecen, in Penang, Malaysia, and then also in Costa Rica. And we make software and hardware for engineers and scientists. So if you've ever heard of LabVIEW or kind of robotics through Lego, I mean, that's kind of our product.
And around the number of employees?
Around 8,500, give or take. 8,500.
It's interesting. You're talking about what happens when you just switch things on. Many of us remember a few years ago we used to describe SharePoint with the wheel or the pie. Remember the 6-sided sets of features? And one of the adoption rules is do not turn on everything all at once and expect nothing but chaos to ensue. Where do you think the frontier is in terms of governance around that kind of user empowerment?
Yeah, I think there's a balance there. I think, when you're looking at 8,000 sites and you pull up the address book and you see 100 of them named test, that's not awesome. But I think enabling people to do their work, IT not getting in the way, not putting too many rules out there. Some people love naming conventions. Personally, I'm not such a fan. Name it whatever you want, Kerry's cool, awesome group or whatever. So I think there's a balance, and I think we're trying to come along the backside and kind of supplement with some things, adding quotas in and some other things around governance that I think will be helpful. But you don't have to have it all figured out in the beginning. Just turn it on and then see kind of where the usage takes you.
But you guys didn't really totally do that. I would call it governance first-ish, which is sort of an approach I think that is really, really helpful. You have to think a little bit. I'm all for turning it all on, but giving people guidance. And you guys really did do that.
We did.
So the guidance is out there. You educate people about what's available. You've done a little bit of thinking about what are the business value of these tools.
I think what we want to talk about next is the intranet itself. What is an intranet? What can it do? What can it not do? Like, how should people, regardless of where their role is, when you look at the technologies that we continue to pioneer here, what's the right approach to being able to use it to solve an actual business need as opposed to a technical wish list? So Sue, I kind of want to start with you about when you are thinking about the necessary and proper role of an intranet as an element of a digital hub, or however people are thinking about it. You work an awful lot with users. What's the things that you keep in mind when you're working with different user constituencies about getting them to express their needs, and how do we manage adoption through kind of a user lens?
So I guess I'm going to answer this question sort of from two perspectives. Number one, I think it's critically important to understand the big rocks for the organization. What are the strategic initiatives that the organization is pursuing? Because that should be the framework in which you look at all of your content and not ask, do you spark joy, but are you adding value to the business?
And let's just point out what I think a poor example of a big rock is moving from 2010 to the cloud is not a big rock.
No, that's not the business initiative that's going to make anyone wake up at night, and it's certainly not going to get you funding for phase 2. And the idea is to tie what you're working on to what the organization cares about. And to carry that forward to the second part of your question, which is for an individual business group, the whole point of creating content on the intranet is to serve an audience that is not you. You are providing a service to the rest of the organization, and you need to understand what the people coming to your site need to do. What are their top asks and their top tasks? What language, not necessarily what language do they speak, but what technical jargon are they aware of, or what's part of the domain in which you work? And I think thinking about that from the home site all the way down to each individual communication site. Who is my audience? What do they need to do? What do they need to learn? Operating everything under that lens allows you to address those key business issues that make your intranet not just entertaining and beautiful, because people aren't coming back for that. They come back because they can get work done.
So let's add a different perspective. Dave, I know you're the master of transition, but let's ask you to consider it from transitioning into an IT role.
Sure.
How does IT position itself to best influence that dialectic about business process and business goals as it moves to adopting technology?
I think it's an awesome opportunity for IT to move up the value chain. I think that it used to be people focused on how do I run my servers? How do I keep SharePoint online? How do I make sure that performance is going to be good? And I think that as more and more folks have moved into Microsoft 365, there's been an amazing opportunity for us to instead have conversations about what do we need to achieve as a business? What are the questions that people are asking? How do I get more out of 50, 60, 70, 120,000 employees and get them all to have the same sheet of music that they're all working from. A great example for me, as part of this new company, there was a 5K raising money for cancer research. And one of my first questions was, does the match apply to me as a new employee? How do I find an answer to a super specific question like that? How do I know about my benefits package? How do I understand how I go off and find the gym that's located at the site in Chicago that I'm going to visit for the first time because I've never been there before? But all of those questions that employees have that they want to be able to find, that's not teamwork. That's not just how do I work with Sue, who I work with every day, day in and out. Like, we know how to work together, but it's how do I interact with information that I don't know? How do I go find things and get access to that information? So search is a big piece of that. Information architecture, navigation, the ability to actually have something that you test and that people can be able to effectively use to go navigate that intranet is absolutely critical.
So Kerry, let's kind of turn to you and kind of the role of the intranet. It's my understanding that you've set up an adoption center to try to surface best practices. So let's go meta. Let's go best practices about best practices. What did you learn about how to share best practices across NI?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things. So there's a ton of great Microsoft content, but don't go Google or Bing SharePoint. Just don't do it. And so we really quickly realized the need to set up an adoption center. We have resources for almost every Office 365 service. Anything that you need to know about SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Stream, Planner, Yammer, everything, we've got it out there. And we've got some training that we've developed even in-house that's supplementing some of the Microsoft content already out there. Best practices around what's the difference between a team site and a comm site? When should I use Yammer? When should I integrate Yammer into my comm site? What's team conversation mean? Is a channel in Stream the same thing as a channel in Teams? The answer is no. But there's lots of things that users have questions about, and so we built this amazing communication site to help with that. And now it's our #1 site at National Instruments. It's our go-to resource. It helps us because we don't have to go say the same things over and over. We'll just send them a URL. So go to Joanne Klein's session Thursday at 11:30, because that's exactly how I built it. It is so easy. You could build one in less than 10 minutes. And some of the best practices are around, you need to train your users, #1. So if you're a person who likes to sit in your cube, get out of it. Because the role of IT these days is not just sitting there at your laptop and just buried in your cubicle, hanging out with all of your vinyls. But it's about, connecting with the users, asking them questions and getting feedback on what are they trying to do and trying to help them find the best, product, Office 365 or not. Chances are mostly it will be Microsoft 365, but we also do everything out of the box. So you don't have to go purchase that expensive, intranet out of the box. Start out of the box first and then kind of see where that leads you and then go self-service all the way.
One of the things that we've seen, the organizations that tend to be the most successful are ones where empowerment isn't just a friendly slogan, but it's a practicality. Like users, information workers, knowledge workers learn best from each other, and creating a community where people can come together and share them is certainly better than my having to think of every possible tip that I can write down and give to someone.
So we're going to go through all panelists and see what their frequently asked questions are, starting with Sue. Sue, people are knocking on your door and they're asking you to clean up their drawer. No, sorry. They're asking you to clean up their metadata in their servers and services.
I thought they were asking her to fold the content neatly to stack into the services.
I just have to say, you bring me joy no matter what you do. I want to get that out of my way first. But what is your most frequently asked questions these days?
Question. It really doesn't have anything to do about organizing content. It's really the difference between Teams, Microsoft Teams, and making a capital T, and Teams site, the little t.
And your answer?
And my answer is, when you create a team, you get a team site. The documents that that are hosted in your team live in a SharePoint team site. You can't have Microsoft Teams without a SharePoint team site. So they're one and the same. But if you see a document anywhere in Office 365, SharePoint is hosting that document. And so they have a different front door, but the content, the document content, is in your team site.
So that's Teams with a capital T plus team sites lowercase, better together.
Better together.
Dave, what's a question that you've been hearing a lot lately?
Yeah, so it's funny. I don't get questions, I get answers. So everyone comes to me and says, I'm going to build this custom thing for this. Here's how I'm going to go do it. So rather than coming to me with a question of how do I go do this, what I hear over and over again is a lot of people saying, here's how I'm going to solve your problem by writing code. So for me, it's actually the flip of it. It's getting people to start asking the question of what is it you're trying to accomplish and how do I do it out of the box. It's the whole way to think about building custom solutions inside SharePoint.
So is that a frequently questioned answer?
It's a frequently questioned answer.
Okay.
Yeah,
FQA.
Yeah, it's
That's an intrazone first, right there, ladies
Yes.
and
Let's
gentlemen.
give Dave a round of applause
Yes.
for FQA.
But it's really interesting because so many of us who grew up in SharePoint are used to having a big box of tools rather than a product that actually works out of the box. So getting people to actually understand what SharePoint does instead of just how to code in it, that really is my frequently asked question. It's what do I do with this thing? I'm used to writing all this code and building it myself, but getting people to start thinking about flow and Power Apps and the view formatting, but being able to think about what I can do in the box just with basic metadata on pages and libraries to organize their content and solve their business problem. That's what I hear more than anything else.
Yeah, that's why I don't let people define requirements.
Yes.
I ban the R word. You should be asking for what are the business outcomes that you're trying to solve. And if you start with outcomes, not requirements, your frequently asked question or frequently questioned answer has a much better conversation.
Start with outcomes. I've never heard that answer before. Okay. Kerry, what's a question that you've been getting?
There are two words that we hear all the time. And one is wiki. When will Microsoft give us a modern wiki? And the second one...
We'll just do this for now. Wiki, wiki, wiki.
Perfect. Yes.
You did it the last time that came up,
Hey,
too.
it's fun to do. You should try it at home as well.
It's called deflection. So I
got
think
a
that,
cough right now.
I think that the second one is notifications, and we've got some other kind of collaboration platforms in our space that aren't Microsoft 365, and so people want to be able to go to a SharePoint page. If you're not a content author, you're just a content consumer, and they want to be able to follow that page and kind of get updates when things change and comments are made and et cetera. Those are two pretty big questions we get a lot.
Very nice.
Great.
Chris?
So one question I've gotten a lot in the last 2 weeks is folks who ask me, because we get to talk to customers left to right around the world in different industries, what is everyone else doing with the cloud? Is anyone else putting their compliant or mission critical content into the cloud? And my answer to that is we're seeing a lot of the mid to late adopters moving in right now. There are many organizations who have moved their mission critical content, their compliant content, their records management content in the cloud because it is a means to being able to really unlock the digital potential that they have with the processes that are out there. Some of that is people doing it directly. Some of it are doing it with some of our SI partners, including some in the room like Avanade, or some of our ISV partners like Knowledge Lake. But there are many people who are doing things with that. This morning, we actually made some announcements on the blog around some new capabilities that we have around being able to bring collaboration into records management, so you can mark something as a record, but still allow people to collaborate in subsequent versions, because we know that happens a lot, that there are special things people need to continue working on documents after they've become records. Along with some new archiving capabilities that allow you to bring third-party data sources like Facebook or LinkedIn pages or Twitter into Office 365 so you can tag it with compliance and retention. So there's a lot of capabilities that are there, a lot more that's coming, and if you keep waiting, you may be one of the last people to get in. But we'll still have you. There's, we'll keep the lights on as long as we can.
Yes, this is the never-ending revolving door into Chris's partner program. It's a very full room. A lot of great companies, a lot of great tech, and Chris is always very friendly when you first meet him.
When you first meet him.
A little qualifier.
There's folks in the room who will back you up on that. Mark, I am now going to ask you.
Yes.
What is your most frequently asked question?
So I'm going to land two because one is fun and very relevant. But the big question I get a lot is, where can I get SharePoint socks? So my answer, if you haven't seen them, these are the new SharePoint socks. But if you follow my Twitter handle while you're at the SharePoint conference, you'll be able to see some laying around in the next couple of days. Just remember, #SPSocks. The real question, though, that I've been getting in the last now couple hours publicly, but for the last 2 weeks as we've been prepping analysts and press, is with differential sync, which is part of the OneDrive sync client coming in the future, what will it actually sync? Does it sync all files in a differential way? And the answer is yes, which is the good answer. But to be frank, it has actually already been doing it for Office documents. Differential sync is, of course, available for Office documents, but the real value of what's coming is, imagine if you change the contents of a PDF or a video file that you're working on that's stored in OneDrive or SharePoint, or something like what we showed today, the integration with Autodesk. If you're working with an Autodesk file and you change a layer or you add an element, it's just the delta that's going to be going over the wire. So part of the question is, what is differential sync? But the bigger question is, what types of files will it work with? And the answer is all files.
So, we've reached the part of today's broadcast where we get to do something we don't ordinarily get to do. We'd love to have questions that you want to ask us, ask our panel, and Mark and I will stalk the room. We have a question right over here.
This is for Sue. Based on your experience, how did you tackle legal compliance approvals for Teams and Yammer rollouts in the organizations where it's like financial or pharmaceutical? Any tips and tricks on that experience? In our company, legal has some reservations on how to monitor, police what's going on in Teams and Yammer with the provided tools in Compliance Center.
In all of the clients that I've worked with, I think legal has not been much of a blocker at all. We definitely see some concerns with records management and sort of how are we managing records appropriately. We were really lucky at Shire, though, because we fell in love with the record. The woman who was the head of records who just didn't ask us to do much of anything as people were actively collaborating on content in SharePoint. It was really when the site was ready for disposition at the end of life that we needed to make some sort of key records decisions. So, all of introducing any sort of compliance-oriented department to new technology often means allowing them to experience it, to see what it feels like to work in this new environment. And I think more than anything else, I would encourage everyone to make sure that their key executives in all departments participate in an opportunity to use these tools themselves so they can see, for example, when multiple people are authoring a document, who gets credited for the win and how often are things saved, and the fact that we don't lose anybody's edits, even if it doesn't look like it saved super quickly. I mean, all of that I think really helps.
Great, thanks a lot, Sue. So next, let's turn to from the great state of Indiana, Stephanie Williams. Welcome to the Intro Zone.
I'm from state government, so I'm in the GCC. So how many of those things are going to be coming to us quickly? And as a bigger question, how are we going to start getting things quicker in general?
I think the part of the answer is just to be frank about what the process is. So the real question is, when does it come to government or GCC, the sovereign type data centers in the space? So typically the way they do it for any rollout is it will go first to the developer's desktop, and then it'll start to move into what they call their first ring, which is not available to anybody. It's just people at Microsoft testing and developing. Then they start to move that into our own tenant, which we call MSIT, Microsoft IT. Then it starts to roll out to targeted release. Then once it's out of targeted release, it goes to full production, not sovereign data centers. And it's at that point in time, once it's at 100% production, is usually when it goes to GCC. And part of the reasoning is the extra layer of privacy and security measures they go through, it just goes through that extra rigor. So sometimes it takes a little time for them to get to there. At other times, it's more of a not at the early phases, is a lot of the ask from those customers. So if you think about one feature in particular that was fairly large, communication sites, we rolled those out and let's just say they started, at 0. By the time they were in GCC, that was a year. We do want to try to accelerate that, and some features certainly don't take that long, but you should think in terms of that cadence. If you see us start to raise the flag that something's moving into targeted release, typically most features are 2 to 4 weeks in targeted release, 2 to 4 weeks for full production rollout. So think in terms of 8 weeks after that first rollout, you should start seeing it in GCC.
It's taking too long, though. We'll fully own that. It takes too long. There is a team of folks trying to optimize it and make sure that we're also clearer with where those things sit on the roadmap. But great question. There's some other folks.
Questions I had were kind of for Kerry and Sue's point, which is when you're talking about best practices and reaching your larger audience of end users, and you had I think you called it the adoption center. How much of the adoption center is actually based around like actual video demonstrations or stuff relative to what your end users are doing? Is that something that you find effective? And then to the second point, I think with Sue's point, having people at the top using it. I definitely have found that implementation and understanding from the top on down is key for it spreading the word. And so those are some of my questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we'll start with Kerry and then...
Yeah, sure. So a couple things. So in terms of videos, we don't really have the staff to really build all that out, but what we have done is a few quick little screen captures where we'll capture a few things and then just do like just a quick walkthrough. But we've built a lot of content that is already kind of curated from the intranet, but then also kind of developing our own around best practices and training and PowerPoint presentations and things like that. But I think in terms of what else we're doing around that is being able to just kind of bring in the leadership through a champions network. And so we're training people in functions, they're training their peers, they're pulling in their leaders, and they're just kind of fanning that out and then being able to bring some of that top-down leadership usage.
Yeah, actually, so I've been building governance sites forever because I've learned that people really want guidance, and if you deliver that guidance in a document, what will happen is that it will not get read. And so if you actually want to get some value out of that content, you need to deliver it in a site. And so when I started working with Shire 2.5 years ago, Dave and I partnered to create what we called, we're not even calling it a governance site, we call it the guidance site. And we have the same exact concept on my Takeda, because we did it once, we can do it again. And the whole idea is we have curated both Microsoft content and our own, because what you can get from Microsoft is how-to. And there's a phenomenal amount of content, both video and text, but honestly, even the Microsoft Docs team has trouble keeping up with creating video. It's usually faster to write some text and maybe have a few sort of screenshots. So what we do is we curate that content and wrap it in how we want you to use that, the how should, inside our content. And what I'm now starting to do, and I think we'll start to do at Takeda as well, is try to weave in some of the Microsoft custom learning content, which are curated playlists that you can integrate your own how should with the content that is already how to create these contextualized learning experiences to bring people what they need when they need it just in time. And so it's really the same exact approach. This is sort of what I've been doing for a living for the last 10 years. And I know that it works because it's repeatable and it allows you to sort of integrate how we're doing it here, what we recommend you do, and the content that Microsoft is evolving.
And I can see that Dave is wanting to jump in here too.
I have just one thing I want to add on top of it. No one will ever ask, tell me the rules. Tell me all of your governance policies. everyone wants to get their job done. That's what's really important to people. So one of the best practices that we got was making sure that when someone opens up a ticket for the help desk, if it's something that we've written content on, send them the link to that guidance page, right? It's the how should, bundled in with the how do I accomplish this task. So we've actually upped the customer satisfaction and closed the time to resolution for our SharePoint support tickets simply by pointing them directly toward content that has the right answer rather than the answer you're going to get from that particular person who's taking that call.
So our next guest, Daniel Christian, you're an MVP?
Yes, sir, I am. Kerry, the question I have for you is, I hear that you're an online user, and then when online features come out, you don't have any control over it. So how do you prepare for things like that?
That is a really great question. So I think we all know there's a lot of features that get released all the time. Microsoft 365 is an evergreen service. It's almost impossible to keep up if we're being honest with ourselves. And so we're really being diligent about reading all of the tech community blogs. We're on top of all the messages that come in the admin center. We're on Twitter. We're following the roadmap in all the places that we're supposed to be, and there's probably some I haven't even mentioned. And so when that thing comes out, and we know that it's going to come at the June 2019 or coming soon, who knows when coming soon is. But
there's a lot of air quoting going on there.
I can't help myself. Yeah, and so I think you might hear a little frustration in there too, in that it is so hard to keep up, but I think for us, it's taking the pulse of our users and what are the things that they're asking for. And so when those things come, like the Q&A thing in Yammer is really big in our community. And so when that gets released, we're going to announce it right away via our amazing adoption center, via news post, Yammer, et cetera. So that's how we do it.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, and then we've got a final question for the panelists from Chris and I.
So I guess my question is to anyone who wants to take it, is there's a cultural shift really in the approach of traditional SharePoint teams, collaboration, things that are being pushed now. How do you facilitate that and calm the nerves of management and the C-suite that you're not giving away the keys to the company store?
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
I think for us, when we first pitched our Modern Workplace Initiative, we went to the C-suite first and we talked about the amazing value that Microsoft 365 would provide. It would help us rationalize some of this other technology out of our stack. It's going to help reduce costs. It's going to increase collaboration and communication and, co-authoring, just for one. I don't have to put my file on a network that I don't know who has access to it. It's just a major win. And so I think for us, it's a lot of things. I think it's some governance, but not so tightly controlled that your users can't do anything. I think it's also trying to control a little bit of that shadow IT and whatever that looks like for you. But I think it's also open communication and collaboration, not only with your C-suite, but with your entire leadership and with your entire company, and being open and transparent about, here are the features that we've turned on for you. Here are some things that we may be holding back and kind of waiting for things to change a bit. But I think it's a journey.
So I think we transition to just closing out here. We've got one final question for our panelists that I hope you'll appreciate, because we want them to be honest. And if I know from the states they're from and the personalities there, they might be brutally honest, which is what we appreciate. So we're halfway through, or almost halfway through 2019. What's the thing that you want to most feedback to Microsoft to get on the ball of X, or to deliver Y, or just some message that would be something that would be proactively nudging? Sue, looks like you want to start first.
I do want to go for it, because otherwise Kerry's going to steal it. It's great how we can get great new features quickly when you're in Office 365. But I would just love to know with a closer degree of accuracy when those features are going to land in my tenant and how they're going to land. Is it going to be targeted release users in a regular tenant or a targeted release tenant? Because it isn't always the same for everything. And we had an issue where some of the members of my team didn't see the new Yammer web part, and it turns out what we learned was they weren't in the targeted release user group for our tenant. It would be really nice to have visibility, closer visibility into when that's going to land.
Yeah, it's great to hear, like, we love to celebrate the keynote, but it's also important to be honest about what were the things that you didn't hear this morning that you wish you'd heard, or things that we should work on. Dave?
Yeah, it's funny. Mine actually is in a very similar area. It would have been exactly the same, but I'll tweak it just a little bit. So I think really just the release cadence. Things come out very, very quickly, and often they evolve very quickly inside the first couple months of release. So some things could be a little bit more mature before they make it further out. So not only an awareness of what's going to hit me, what has hit me, but maybe also just letting it mature a little bit more before you get a full worldwide availability on some of those features could be nice to have just a little bit more time to marinate and nail it.
And does the audience agree?
Yes.
Okay. Kerry, final words to Microsoft.
Well, I don't want to be boring, but I echo all of that. I think two specific things along those lines is please update the roadmap, because if it really is not releasing in CY, whatever, change it so that we really know when it's coming. And I really appreciate what you guys have done on the blog, specifically the SharePoint blog, and including more information about when it's coming towards the end, because that's what our users see, because then we get pinged like, hey, oh, this feature's coming. When do we get it? When do we get it? We're like, hold your horses. You know, when we see a message in the admin center, then you might be getting it coming soon or within at least the next 2 months. So more accuracy as to when.
Understood. Well, let's get a round of applause if you agree with all the feedback. So we will take that in and we will do our best as we always do, and we will certainly always take the feedback. So we want to say thank you to Sue Hanley, thank you to Dave Feldman, thank you to Kerry Lambert for being on the Intrazone, and we want to thank you all for joining in the Intrazone, and we hope you have a great rest of the SharePoint conference. Please tell your friends to go to aka.ms/theintrazone, listen to an episode, hopefully subscribe, like it, send us all your ideas and content to the Intrazone at Microsoft.com. Chris, any last statements?
No, we really appreciate everyone joining us live. It's always a lot of fun, but you know, as always, you've wasted another perfectly good hour listening to the Intrazone. So we're your hosts, Chris McNulty and Mark Cashman. Thank you.